Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this a short episode of Thoughts in History from a Centenarian with Dale Dyer. This episode was cut short by a rainstorm, as you'll see at the end of the video, and also by an expected visitor Dale was having come by to drop off some paperwork. And we were just tying up some loose ends of his flight instructor days at Smyrna, Tennessee, his transfer to Boise, Idaho to pick up his combat crew for the European theater, and his final days of training before being sent overseas to England to fly combat missions over Western Europe. So sit back and enjoy. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Thoughts in History from a Centenarian with Dale Dyer. We left off when Dale was flight instructor in Nashville, or Smyrna, outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and he was telling some stories of the students that he had to instruct and some of the incidences that happened during his time of instruction there. So we'll pick it up from there, and then we'll get on into him being sent overseas to England to fly bombing missions over Western Europe during his time. So we'll pick it up from there. Pop, you said you had a couple of instances of giving instruction to students and all?
Yes, one that I might mention, I had two students that I'd been flying, and I got them in position where they was ready to solo themselves without me being in the airplane. And we were assigned to Clarksville up in Kentucky, and I went up there with them in the plane, and then I got out and instructed them to do several touch and goes. And I went up in the tower and I was in contact with them all the time, standing in the tower on the radio. Well, they made about 2 or 3 touch and goes, and all at once, co-pilot sitting in the right seat, he had just been kind of flying at in intervals, and he had just taken his feet off of the pedals, and the propeller on his right came off of the shaft, and the blade sliced down through the side of the plane right where his feet had been. And if he hadn't had his feet off there, it would cut off both of his legs. And he'd just pulled them off, and that propeller sliced down through there. Well, that was a pretty good emergency, but they took it under control, and they brought it around and landed it safely.
Now,
which was a great feat for 2 boys on their primary solo flight.
so they were by themselves then,
They were by themselves.
and were able to get it down without incident. But if that guy had left his feet where they were at, he'd lost both of his, or at least his feet, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of a eye opener of what can happen anytime when you're flying. Anything can happen. But then another occasion, we'd been having some bad weather, and it was about in February, 1st of February, up there at Smyrna, and we'd not getting any flying time. The ceiling was just right on the ground just about. So they told us to pick a place and fly out of there and go there, get away from there where we could get in some flying time with our students. Well, I didn't, maybe I was just a little bit green, but I picked Buffalo, New York in February.
Not a great place to pick.
Yeah.
In the middle of winter like that.
Well, we went out and got in a plane, and I had 4 boys that I was supposed to let them have turns of flying, and we took off, and in 300 feet, we were in the clouds. We climbed up to 14,000 feet, and we never did get out of the clouds. So I dropped back down to 10,000 feet. We went up through Tennessee and Kentucky, and on towards Ohio and up towards the Great Lakes and Buffalo and over Kentucky. We evidently went through a weather front, and I had one of the students flying, and I was sitting in the co-pilot seat, and it just got pretty bad. We was pretty much in some kind of a storm, and he thought he was losing it, and it got him scared, and he just finally got out of the seat and said we were going to crash. Well, I took over the thing and got the thing back under control, and we soon got out of that area. But we stayed in the clouds clear up to Buffalo, and it was nighttime. It was only about 5 or 6 o'clock, but it was dark up there at that time, very dark. And I started letting down over the lake, one of the Great Lakes there before we got to Buffalo. And I got down to about 600 feet before I began to see some lights from the towns along the edge of the lake. And as we approached Buffalo, I could see the searchlight of the airport, and we flew in there and landed, and they just got through scraping the runway, and we was the only plane that landed there that day in Buffalo, and there was 2 or 3 foot of snow on the ground, and we had to stay there 3 days before they'd let us try to fly out. So
was this a military airport up there?
It was a regular passenger airport.
Oh, passenger airport, not an air base.
No,
okay.
It wasn't on a regular air base. Anyway, when we did get they called and finally said that it was cleared off down in at Nashville or Smyrna, and that we could come on back home. So we took off that afternoon about 4 or 4:30 to fly back to Nashville, and we got over, even with Akron, Ohio. We were about 50 miles to the east of Akron on our flight back, and they called us up and says that there's some storm coming in and we need to come to Akron and land and get on the ground before the storm. Well, we turned
at Akron.
At Akron.
Yeah.
And we turned and went to Akron, and we got there just as the storm got there.
Mm.
And I made a pass at the runway, and it was just raining so hard that we couldn't even see the runway with our lights on. And I had to circle around it and made the second pass at it, and we lined up right on the runway and come in and landed. And just as a side wind hit us, and I had to use off power on the engines on that side and the brakes to keep the thing from ground looping. And there was the lakes locked down on that side, and the wheels skidded until we come to a stop right on the main runway, and got stopped. The wind shook the plane, and it kind of broke loose the brake, and we taxied in, and every time the wheel would turn over, that burnt off rubber would go plump, plump, plump.
Because you had that flat spot on there.
Yeah, the fellow checked it for me. It says that there was one ply left, and he didn't understand how it kept from blowing out. So
you have to be one of the luckiest people I know, especially back during the war.
Anyway, we finally got back to Nashville, and it was good to get back in the good old South. But then I finally got orders in early 44 to Boise, Idaho, and to pick up a crew to go overseas to train with and we trained for 2 months together, and then we were shipped overseas.
Well, we'll stop it right there because it looks like we're fixing to get a downpour of rain, and it's going to drown us out. So we're going to bring this episode to a close, but we will pick it up from there on our next episode of Thoughts in History from a Centenarian. So please join us. Thanks for watching, everyone, and if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like below and consider supporting our channel by clicking on the subscribe button as well. If you have any questions or suggestions for content, please leave a comment below and we will be sure to read them. And to be notified of any new uploads, turn on notifications at the upper right hand corner of your screen, and we will see you in our next episode.